Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast. I am Dr. Supatra Tovar, and I am thrilled to have holistic trauma therapist Seema Sharma with us today. Seema, welcome.
Thank you.
I'm going to read a little bit about Seema, and then we're going to get right into our questions for her. Seema Sharma, MA, MBA, LMFT, is a dedicated trauma therapist and the founder of the Consciousness Center and Legacy Trauma Therapy, a groundbreaking approach to healing intergenerational trauma through consciousness and emotional integration. With over 2 decades of experience in senior leadership at notable Fortune 500 companies, Seema combines real-world experience with her lifelong passion and obsession with holistic healing. Deeply committed to empowering clients, Seema combines traditional therapeutic techniques with innovative practices that tap into the transformative power of awareness and self-discovery. Inspired by her own journey and the profound resilience she has witnessed with her clients, Seema specializes in helping individuals break free from cycles of inherited pain, fostering healing that resonates across generations. Her mission is to guide people toward reclaiming their authentic selves and building a legacy of emotional freedom and wholeness. Welcome, Seema.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to pick your brain because I'm very interested in the power of consciousness. But before we get into all of that, I would love to hear your personal journey. How did that, you said that, your own journey helped you, guide your educational path. Give us a picture of that and how that influenced how you treat trauma.
Yeah, I was actually really struck by, and this is going to date me, a Peter Jennings special when I was in high school.
Him.
Yes, and he did this special on indigenous communities and global communities addressing trauma in a different way than the Western world.
Yes.
And that really struck me because the efficacy of that treatment was surpassing Western modalities. And I was in high school at the time, and just absolutely it awoken something in me. And so I knew at that moment in time, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I went on this search for a school that I could almost do that at. And I landed at the Claremont colleges, and they had at that time a degree called psychobiology. And I assumed I could somehow put that together, but I was way ahead of the curve. Those sorts of programs weren't really accessible for a lot of people or weren't at notable schools. And so I gave up on that dream and decided to move into the corporate world where, I climbed the ladder and moved into senior leadership at some major companies like General Motors and Amazon and companies like that. And Pinterest was my last position. And I discovered looking around me, like the toxicity of our culture, the consciousness and the lack of consciousness in those environments really being pervasive. And I think it was somewhere around 2017 where that dream in me was reawoken. And I came across a school in San Francisco, which was a drive from Southern California.
A bit.
A bit, yes. And attended the California Institute of Integral Studies, where they had a mind-body-spirit program that really was almost what I was looking for all those years.
Oh, wow.
And I went through and I got my master's degree and became a clinician that way. And then knew for certain that I was going to pursue my PhD and be focused on transpersonal healing through the lens of consciousness.
I love this.
Yeah, and so that's what I did, and I eventually stepped down from leadership just this past July and decided to go full steam ahead and created the Consciousness Center, as well as legacy trauma therapy dedicated to consciousness, which is still a lens that I don't see very much of in the therapeutic world.
Give us a picture of what, your understanding of consciousness was from Peter Jennings, of what it wasn't in the Fortune 500 companies, and what I think a lot of people, I think consciousness is kind of a vague term and they don't really fully understand it. What was your, kind of learning path to where you are now?
Yeah. A big key component of the Peter Jennings special, which was probably edited in a lot of ways at that time, was the collective. And that's essentially what consciousness is. It is a fabric that connects all living things and non-living things on this planet. And looking at the corporate world, survival is independence. Survival is protection of self. Survival is individualism and not collective. And so you created a system that goes against the very fabric of who we are as human beings. And of course, there's going to be toxicity. There's going to be people that climb the ranks that have pathology. And so that's really what I witnessed was the various pathologies, various separations between teams, rivalry, competition, as well as opposed to collaboration.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And then
now, in my understanding through a scientific and research lens, we know that there is consciousness that exists locally, which is within us, our awareness of who we are, our awareness of our body, but also a non-local consciousness that impacts us. Because if we look at the human body through an electromagnetic lens, we know that we exist beyond the material, which is our physical body. We actually can exist, feet away. So it's, depending on mood, we expand and contract like energetic beings. And so there is a lot of us that's still not understood. And there's a lot of us that is the non-physical. And so that too has an awareness. And that's really what consciousness is an understanding of human experience that encompasses all parts of our, inputs and our awareness.
how are they able to measure that?
Yeah. So there are mixed method studies. We have to be far more stringent in terms of our research than other mainstream research. We have some notable people like Charles Tart, who's done a lot of research related to, his work is what created clinical hypnotherapy. A lot of his work is in that, but they've parsed out the transpersonal. He does single, double, and triple blind studies, as well as Stephen Schwartz, another great researcher. They study all kinds of people. The largest body of research for transpersonal psychology, one of them is the United States government. And so a lot of that research for us comes from the U.S. government, comes from Duke University, which has the Ryan Institute there. It comes from University of Arizona. A lot of schools are moving into the world of consciousness and trying to understand this one variable that's kind of been omitted. We are also part of the APA. It's really hard to find us. We are part of Division 32. And there is an entire section of transpersonal psychology.
What was the government, why were they so interested in consciousness? Was it a part of MK Ultra and kind of mind melding experiments and things like that?
Yeah. So this comes from my class, Foundations of Consciousness. And we had a lot of the people that were working in the government come through our class and talk about what they were doing. They were part of the defense system. Every country has remote viewers as part of their defense system, is what we were told. This program was shut down by the recent political swing. And so they've kind of they don't have a job, but they are remote viewers. They know and are able to psychically determine what's happening in other countries. They are part of the defense system.
Whoa, that is wild.
Yeah.
And you said that it's shut down now by
conservative politicians is what I was told.
Wow.
Yeah, and so at the moment it's shut down, but the research has been declassified, which has allowed us to then access that piece of research.
What have you learned?
There's quite a bit out there. I think this is older research. This is very archaic. Some of the greatest research, I want to say, comes from some of the newer researchers. My personal favorite is Marjorie Woolcott, who does a lot of studies with savants, so autistic savants, nonverbal, around being able to read the clinician's mind, their clinician's mind. So they'll hold up a card and they'll write down what the card is. And they're just, the accuracy is there's even a YouTube video out there if you want to look that up as to like how that research was done.
Well, I think it's in some ways similar to, I'm sure you've heard of the Silva method, and using that level of consciousness to kind of read other people's minds.
Yeah.
What is the application of consciousness, the awareness of it, and trauma treatment?
Yeah. So these are the pieces of research. When it comes to trauma treatment, we've got to come back to the individual. Every human being on this planet has an idea of why they're here, what their purpose is, if they really, and that's what our goal is to use transpersonal tactics and techniques in order to help them rediscover themselves. And it may be through anyways. I think parapsychology gets a lot of bandwidth in transpersonal psychology, but it's not a majority of our discipline. A big part is meaning and purpose. That is, our transpersonal psychologists are focused on transformation, transformation of the self, which is a naturally evolving process, and our propensity to get better. So when we look at trauma, we want to almost allow the person to tap into the non-local consciousness, to give them a good idea of who they are. There's a lot of ways to do that, and then move back into the local consciousness and look at their story. And that's for those that are more stabilized. Of course, if they're coming in, we have been heavily trained on traditional methods, and, we've been through the whole ISSTD, advanced trauma training and everything else. So we do have traditional methods, but when it comes to using consciousness, we're using that transcending experiences. A great one that gets a lot of news is psychedelics. So psychedelics is under the umbrella of transpersonal psychology because of the transformations that come from that.
So aside from psychedelics, say somebody's against that, doesn't they don't want to do drugs. How can they access the outer personal consciousness? Yeah,
one of the things I always, very often, have my clients do is holotropic breathwork. Breathwork's just the very act of breathing, and fast, rapid breathing mimics very similarly psychedelics, and so it's far more aligned to trauma healing, because the client is always in control. And so I've had clients come to me for various things, and one of the things my dissertation is on, loneliness. A lot of them come to me for loneliness or like chronic loneliness. This makes them feel connected within an hour.
Wow.
And so it actually reactivates some of the receptor degradation that's occurred in the limbic system due to prolonged periods of loneliness, which really create inefficacy of SSRIs. So they have medication, it's ineffective because they don't have the receptors for the reuptake. And so what we're doing is almost reactivating those receptors through the use of breath.
Okay. You got to break that down into plainer English for people who don't necessarily understand limbic system and what happens with loneliness. And I think you can probably equate that to trauma as well and what it does to the limbic system. But help our listeners understand that on a simpler level. Sure.
So the limbic system is really our trauma response. It is our automatic response we have when we're triggered. And whenever we have our limbic system is activated, that means our neocortex, or our thinking brain, is not online. So all of a sudden you're not thinking, you're not able to make decisions. What you're doing is it's a reactive portion of your brain.
For people who really want to understand that, it's like fight or flight or freeze is really what she's talking about.
Correct. Yeah. And so there's receptors there. So when you take antidepressants, for example, They break down and are absorbed by, I like to say, these little hats that kind of catch the little molecules and have them absorbed. But what happens with prolonged loneliness is these hats stop working. They actually start like degrading, like degenerating within the limbic system. So you have no hats. What's happening is toxicity is occurring as opposed to the reuptake, which means the absorption of the antidepressants. The thing that breath work does, as well as psilocybin specifically, is
drugs.
Yeah, is basically it gets those hats working again.
Wow.
And so all of a sudden, and these are connector receptors too, where you can be in a room of people and still feel lonely. They feel connected for the first time as well.
Wow. So give me a picture of what the breath work looks like. You said it's rapid breathing as opposed to controlled time breathing. And give me a picture of why rapid breathing activates this as opposed to controlled timed, slower breathing.
Yeah. One of the biggest researchers around this is Stan Grof. And he's one of the founders of transpersonal psychology, but also the founders of psychedelics. And when it was made illegal in the United States in the 60s, he started doing a lot of research around breath work. His research, there isn't a reasoning as to why it happens, how breath is self-healing. But I think the point is we have the ability to heal ourselves.
Yes.
And that is universal consciousness. And so that's the way consciousness is working. Your own internal power is working to heal yourself.
Okay. So, but through the breath, but why fast breath?
Yeah, because it over-oxygenates. It over-oxygenation of your brain creates that experience. I'm not exactly sure how many trials he did to get this to be a certain way, but that's what they know. That's what he's trademarked as holotropic breathwork.
Wow, this is so fascinating. I'm curious to, you're saying people have the ability to heal themselves. And we know that this, there's plenty of research out there showing that people have been able to do that. Is it primarily through breathwork? I know, like through Reiki healing, they are tapping into universal consciousness, the healers, and basically funneling it your way. But how does it work if you're doing this yourself, or you're doing this, in treatment with you?
Yeah. So a lot of clients, the way it works is breathwork is just one of the many, many tools. Depending on the client, we will pull out a tool like automatic writing.
Yeah.
Writing talks to some people, and that's the variable of them accessing that. So whatever it is that works for that specific client is what we will utilize. What happens is things show up that the client didn't know that provide them clarity in a manner only they will know. One of my clients likes to say, like, when she does this, she flies to the sky and she has this profound experience, and she's like, I don't need treatment anymore because I'm kind of done at 6 months.
Wow.
And she's been in therapy for about 10 years prior to this. Wow. And so that's the power of consciousness, and that's the power of her. And they're picking up tools along the way that they can almost keep with them. Another piece is intention, just simply having intention. And I like to cite Dr. Emoto's water experiment.
Yes, that is fascinating. Tell everybody about that.
Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah, so he had all these little vials of water, and every single vial of water, he kind of expressed a different emotional state. So
Wow.
Love was given to one vial of water and hate to another, just to make it really simple. And when these vials of water were frozen, the love turned into this crystal that was gorgeous.
Yeah, little snowflakes. It was beautiful.
Yeah, and the one with hate turned into gray mush.
Yes.
And we are 70% water.
Yes.
And so that's one of the ways that we can almost, through the power of consciousness and thought, actually create change without actually, going through the process necessarily. But these are all little crutches that help us to get where we want to go.
Right. So I would assume meditation's another way.
Yeah.
You said automatic writing. Is there any other that stands out to you?
Yeah, we also use nature quite a bit. Nature's one. We use lead by spirit, which is basically allowing yourself to lead by your intuition and not to judge that. The act of learning to listen to your inner voice. And there's different ways to do it and different techniques, but depends on what the client's coming in with, what they've struggled with, what that specific trauma was, in terms of like what specifically might work for them.
Interesting. Well, give us a few techniques. This is something I actually have my clients just tap into, or just to learn how to listen to that still small voice. But I would love to hear what techniques you have to offer.
Yeah, my clients, I just have them do a weekend led by inner self. If you want to go get coffee, go get coffee. If you want to go to the beach and sit down, go sit down. And not allow that inner critic or that judgment piece or any other voice to almost like take away from that. And it's been it's been invaluable to a lot of my clients who have lived a life of trauma, especially childhood trauma. And this piece has been quashed.
Yes.
And so it's just the act of allowing space for this to happen in a more consistent fashion that then empowers them to speak up in their everyday.
Wow. I could ask you a million questions on this. This is so fascinating. I do want to talk about how your therapy helps to break intergenerational trauma cycles. Explain how, because I'm sure a lot of people out there are very interested and are aware of the cycles of trauma that have been passed down over generations.
Yeah, so when I work with a client, I will start working with a single member, a single client, and as they start making changes, as they start reformulating the life they want, as they start looking at themselves differently and their future differently, we are connected beings on this planet. They inadvertently affect everyone around them, which then affects, generations afterwards.
Yes.
Me making changes in my lifetime has definitely affected my 3 daughters, and they have a very different future than I've ever had. And it has actually affected the generation above me, like my aunts and my uncles, because they've witnessed the change and then are empowered to make change themselves.
Wow.
And that's like the effect of intergenerational change, is a single person has the power to be the catalyst.
How do you get them to understand that? I definitely work with my clients to help them understand that their energy is infectious. Just like when you go into a room and somebody's in a bad mood, you pick up on their energy and oftentimes, just inadvertently get into a bad mood yourself. But do you teach them that they have the power to change other people's energy along with themselves?
No, actually, I teach them that when we are impacted by another person's energy, our receptors are turned out. So we are HSP, highly sensitive person. We are picking up the emotions around us.
Yes.
And that is a trauma response.
Totally.
And the goal is to almost release the fear and the responsibility of others to live a liberated life. And that authenticity and the genuine nature of living in and aligned with your true self, that's what creates change, is because people see your energetic field expand in a way when you're aligned with what you're doing and what you have to do on this planet.
Do you find that the one who usually seeks therapy, they may often be the scapegoat of the family, or they may often be the one that's like the most traumatized, but then they end up being the one who helps lead the family toward better healing?
Yeah, definitely. They are usually the IP, which is the scapegoat of the family for sure, or they are the parentified. So either one. I get a lot of oldest children for some reason. So I get a lot of oldest children that have been parentified and just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I get a lot of over producers. So a lot of women who are executives come to me because of my professional background. And they've been overproducing, overfunctioning, and compensating for those around them.
Yeah.
And the act of almost stepping back is the scariest thing in the world. And so like that authentic self allows you to step back where you need to and step forward for yourself.
Oh, I love this. Now, many people might not even realize that they're living with the effects of trauma. What are some ways unresolved trauma manifests itself in daily life, and how does one's sense of connection with consciousness help individuals recognize and address it?
Yeah. So I think that trauma manifests in the mind, for sure, in our inner critic that's developed. It's usually the voice of our biggest perpetrators. It also develops in the way we daydream, in, the things that we think about. I think Donald Kalshed's one of my favorite Jungian therapists out there that talks about trauma has the inner child dive into the underworld of archetypes of their persecutors. And that's really what it is. It's like they've created this world within their head. And that's what happens to those with trauma is they're living in a reality that isn't here. What happens to the body, so as a somatic clinician as well, it's like I'm noticing psychosomatization, gut problems, problems in the neck and the shoulders, and all of these issues related to various things happening to them. A lot of I don't know what's happening, chronic pain, prolonged pain, a lot of physicality related to just holding on to their trauma for a long time. And Dan Siegel always talks about this is just energy held in our body. And that's where the consciousness comes through. Because when you're allowing consciousness and being aligned to who you are, you release some of this energy that's in your body.
How? How do you help people release that energy?
Yeah, either through somatics, which is turning off your brain, turning off your head, and not feeling, and it's like not thinking, but just feeling, and allowing that to move forward and allowing that to have a voice. Very similar to spirit leading is the body leading. Embodied intelligence is something that we all have. Our body does know how to heal, does have memories, and it's allowing those memories to come forward.
That might be vague for people. If you could help them understand how that actually works.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I had a client come to me and wanted to do somatic experiencing therapy as a SEP. So really just have them just take a deep breath and really just feel what's going on in their body. And intellectualization is usually the number one coping mechanism for all of my overperformers and trauma folks. And it's like the hardest thing is turning off that head.
Yeah.
And simply feeling the emotion that happens to sit in the body with no narrative and no story, but seeing what shows up. And what shows up is all of a sudden emotion, feeling, shaking. And that's how the energy starts moving. And if we just sit with it, it'll start shifting around. You'll start having, it'll be attached to a feeling, an emotion, an image. A lot of things can happen with that. And that's what we're doing. It usually exits through the top of the head or through our feet. We allow that energy to move through.
Wow. And what have you seen people experience after that?
Yeah, a lot of catharsis, like crying and a lot of movement, things that they didn't know they were holding. A lot of it is surprise. Surprise that they were even holding on to something like that. Wow. Or a memory that they couldn't recall before. Because we are nonverbal, really before 7, we don't have full language. So it is technically all in our body. So when we work with childhood trauma, we have to work with the body.
Oh, I love this. I could talk to you all day. This is so fascinating to me. We're out of time for this half of this podcast, but we are coming back, and we hope you all come back for the second half of this amazing episode with Seema Sharma, holistic trauma therapist. She is incredible, and really this is innovative in terms of the treatment of trauma. This is something that is emerging as an amazing field, and she's right at the forefront of it. So come back next week, come back next time for the second half of this amazing episode. Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight podcast. Please remember, the content shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. You can find us anywhere podcasts are streaming, on YouTube at my.anew.insight and at anew-insight.com under the ANEW Insight podcast tab. Follow us on our socials at my.anew.insight on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads for more updates. Tune in next time and evolve with us.